Yeah, so I have two moments. And the first moment, I was a senior in high school running a race that a year ago I had failed to complete. I had just broken down.
Wow.
And my senior year, I ran that race and ended up finding this flow state, finding this connection to the universe, whatever you want to call it. And I ran with more confidence than I ever had before, and I won that race.
Oh,
and
wow.
after that, I set a personal record every subsequent race, and it changed my outlook on what I could do.
What was possible for you?
Yeah, what was possible. And that confidence carried over into school, into the workplace, just kind of into my general presence. It was kind of a boy becomes a man moment for me.
Wow.
Yeah. And then the second moment was when I was 35, when I was in Spain. I was in a transition period. I just finished up 10 years in clean energy, and I was deciding, do I want to stay in solar or do I want to try something else? And being 12 weeks on the road, I'd given myself 12 weeks. And really that 12th week, I was in Spain. I had a few days on my own. I'd been traveling with other people the whole time. And in that distance, in that reflection, I kind of realized that the thing I wanted to really attack was disinformation.
Yeah.
And that I was young, I had the opportunity, and I wanted to go after this problem. And this was a problem bigger than what I'd been working on previously. And I got that idea, I got the inspiration, and I felt this was the moment to go after it.
And that's what you've been doing.
And I've been doing that ever since.
Yeah. I'm Dr. Larry Burchett, and as I see every day in the ER, life can change in a moment. Here on the show, we tell the stories that matter most, after which we are never the same. Well, we've got a good show for you today. My good friend Shouvik Banerjee is in the house.
Great to see you, Larry.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I'm honored to be here.
I'm glad and a little surprised I was finally able to twist your arm to get you on the show. I feel like you were dodging me for a while.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to, let it marinate, unfold, but I think I understand my moment. I think I understand.
Oh, you're ready with your moment. Can I tell the story how we met?
Yes.
I love that story. Do you not like that story?
I like the story a lot. It's an unusual story.
It is unusual that we became buds after that. We were both living in the San Francisco Bay Area and went to one of these kind of charity party things, to meet people. And I remember going all dressed in a suit, and I'm standing in line, and this guy in front of me, I was like, oh, it seems like just say hi and see what this guy is doing. It was you. I just randomly said hi to you in front of me.
Larry's a friendly guy, yeah.
And, got to know you a little bit, found out you're from Chicago. I was like, oh, you're a Stanford guy. And I think we had this is back when you're now married, we were single. And the funny thing is, and I've said this before, those events in San Francisco, I met more friends that are men, guy friends, than I ever met girls that I was interested in, which I thought was ironic. And you and I have
the San Francisco way.
I came out with some really good friends out of it, actually, and you were one of them. Went to your wedding. It's been a year?
It's been a year. So yeah, we celebrated our anniversary last week.
Oh, congratulations!
Yeah, thank you.
So I always loved that story of, randomly, and you never know how you're going to meet people. And
yeah, I think it's true, and I think that like most of my friendships happen in school or in the workplace. I think what was unusual, we met at a charity event. We met kind of being out and about, but I think at that stage in our lives, we were really kind of trying to figure out who we were and trying some risks professionally. And I was struck by, in that setting, you were just a very generous guy. And that setting, nightlife, when you're young, in your 20s, can be a very shallow, competitive, posturing. And I think it was
generous. What, did I buy you a drink or something?
I think, I can't remember exactly why, but I remember coming away with the fact that you were a more genuine guy.
Yeah.
right? And at that time in our lives, all of us are kind of posturing, trying to be cool.
Out to get yours.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that, that occasionally when you're out in a city at that stage in your life, you form a friendship, and here we are.
Here we are. Welcome to the show.
Yeah.
A mutual friend of ours, Kaj Larson. What episode was Kaj? 4? Yeah, episode 4. How a lifeguard became a Navy SEAL. So he was on the show. So it's good to have you.
Yeah.
So you've been thinking about your moment, huh?
Yeah. I mean, there's a very distinct moment. If you ask me for one moment, there's a very distinct moment that happened in high school. And then there's a more recent moment that's kind of shaped what I'm doing right now.
So you got a couple moments.
So I probably have 2 moments.
Okay.
But the first moment it was when I was a senior in high school.
Go ahead.
And I was a cross-country runner. And did you run cross-country?
No, I had friends that did. I played football. That was the cross-country time.
Soccer is basically cross-country.
Cross-country season was in the fall for us.
Right. So cross-country, you run 7 guys per team, and you all run a big race. If there's 10 schools, there's 70 runners.
Isn't it like 3 miles or something?
Yeah, it's 5K, 3.1 miles, or can be 3 miles. And most races, you're kind of relying on your teammates, and you kind of run as a pack. You might split up into like the front pack, the back pack. But there's a particular race, I grew up in Illinois, there's a particular race called Crete Moni, where they run as flights. So all the top runners of each school run against each other. All the number 2 runners, 3 runners, they have 7 flights for the varsity races. So when I was a junior, I was the 5th guy on our team. And I went off on this run, and I was running kind of by myself for the first time.
On this flight run?
Yeah.
Okay.
First time I did a flight race. First time I did a race without the pack.
Okay.
And somewhere on the 2nd mile, my body just broke.
Ooh.
Yeah. And I remember just almost stopping. Like I almost couldn't run anymore. I definitely could not run at race pace. And then 2 of my teammates, they were watching the race, so they were like the 8 and 9 guy on the team. And if I broke down, one of them would get a varsity spot, right? And instead of like just kind of looking out for their self-interest, they ran with me an entire 1.5 miles so I could finish the race. So that was a very powerful moment of kind of understanding what it's like to run without a team, and number 2, that your team will have your back even if you're on your own. And I was actually junior when that happened. So my senior year, fast forward.
So you finished that race.
I finished that race
in a reasonable time.
No. It was a bad time.
But at least you finished and kept your spot.
I did not keep my spot. I actually, after that race, I think I was injured and did not.
So you got hurt.
Yeah,
You were out.
I basically, I was hurt, and I don't think I ran another race till track, like several months later.
So that ended that season.
That cross country season was over.
Okay.
So then my senior year, season starts, and I was okay. I was doing okay. I had that's a similar type of thing happened my 3rd or 4th race where I kind of, but I was with a pack of runners, but I also kind of gave out, got tired. Something hit me, and I didn't do well, and like I was kind of getting that fear back that like what happened at Crete might happen again. So then my next race, I actually got moved down to junior varsity because I did so bad on that race. My next race, I ran JV, won the race, which put me back in varsity. So then we're going back to Crete Moni.
You got first out of everybody.
In the JV, yeah. So then I'm back now. I was like
at the same place.
Yeah. So now I'm back to Crete-Moni. Okay, so I've re-earned my varsity spot. At that point, I was going in as the sixth man. And then I remember like being psyched out the whole week, like going back to Crete, going to be running on my own again. And then,
that's right. It was the flight thing.
Yeah.
Right? So you're going to be alone. Okay.
I'm going to be alone. And, I'm like a 17-year-old kid. Like I was, I was definitely like, would get stressed out pretty easily.
Shouvik, how you feeling? Oh, I'm feeling fine.
Exactly.
Feeling strong. I got this. Like the inner feeling is fear.
And then like really freaking out about like, am I going to break down again? And then I remember that day it was raining. It was raining pretty hard. And so we line up, the seventh guys are off, and then I was slated to be the sixth guy at this point. And so I'm lining up with all the other sixth flight runners, and the gun's about to go off, and then and I'm like freaking out at this point, okay? And then all of a sudden it starts raining really hard. And it rained so hard.
This is like a movie.
It was like a movie, right? And it started raining so hard that they had to delay the race by a minute, which is very unusual in a flighted race because you have to keep things going.
Yeah.
So like, all right, we're taking a 60-second break to see if the rain stops. And then my coach comes over, and Coach Sear, who was kind of like a father figure, kind of a legendary figure in Naperville, the town I grew up in. He comes over, he's like, okay, you feeling good? And I'm like, I don't want to run. Have one of the alternates come in. I was like, I wanted to just leave the race. I wanted to quit.
Yeah.
And he's a very composed, gentle man, like a true gentleman.
Yeah.
And he'd never raised his voice in 4 years since I was a freshman. And he just started yelling, and he's like, why can't you believe in yourself? I want you to run this damn race. I don't care what place you get. And I'd never been reprimanded by, this guy who's been like most of the year, cross country and track, like every day of school, basically, this guy's been my coach for 4 years.
Yeah.
And my parents were not very strict either. So I'm like, at that age, I was like, whoa, I'm getting like yelled at by this father figure. And so it kind of like kicked my ass a little bit. And then the rain, it was still raining, but then they shoot the gun. And so I like go off from the race. And after the first, I think, 3/4 of a mile, you enter a forest. So like the spectators can't see what's happening. And I was like way back in the pack going into the forest.
A little bit behind.
Quite behind. And then in the forest, I started like passing people. When we came out of it, I think I was like, by that point, in like 4th or 5th place in the race.
How many are in this race? 20, 50?
I'd say like 30, like probably like 20 or 30 schools there. So
good amount.
Good amount, yeah. And then, so like 20 or 30 people per flight.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I see my teammate, the 7th flight guy, was kind of at the front of his race, and he sees me, and we kind of like high five each other. And then I'm in like 3rd place going through the 2nd mile. And then like 3rd mile is starting, and we're about to come back in front of the stadium. And then all of a sudden it hits me. I'm like, I feel great. Like I'm like, I'd almost forgotten that I was scared because of the rain and the yelling and et cetera. And I'm like, let me just see what I got in me. And I just started my sprint a little early.
Mm-hmm. About a mile out. Maybe.
About a mile out. And usually I would wait till like 3/4 of a mile out, maybe even a half mile out. And I'm like, I got a lot in the tank. And I just took off. And then I ended up like running one of my best races, won the flight.
Nice. You got 1st place in those guys.
In the flight 6. And then from then on, pretty much every race, I would set a personal best, kept getting better. And then as a team, we made it to we made it to the sectionals, and we made it to state. And then at state, I had a really good race. And it was just this moment in that Crete-Moni race where
the second one, where I went in holding all this baggage from the year before. Yeah.
And something triggered where it all just disappeared and everything was in sync. And once I overcame that, like every race afterwards was like
built your confidence, and then you
exactly, yeah. And then I mean, to this day, when I go running, there'll be moments when I'm feeling tired, or maybe I don't want to run that extra mile, and I actually remember like details of that moment, details of that race when I was 17, and like it just subconsciously just gets me going again.
Something happens.
Yeah.
You tap into that.
I do tap into that. And mostly I tap into it in running, but I think the confidence that I got, and it literally was from one race, one moment, that confidence.
In that forest.
In that forest, right? It was after the forest, I think, when it really kicked in. But the confidence from that race definitely, it was kind of like a becoming a man kind of moment for me.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think I ever got scared going into a race after that. Like, we had a senior track season. I'd still do sports competitively. I didn't in college, but I don't think I ever like puked before like a race, a 5K or a half marathon or anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are. So if you were going to say there was a moment that really shaped me, I think I'd say that was it.
So so now it's almost been a lifetime since this race in high school.
It's been 22 years, 23 years.
To hear you talking about it, there still seems to be this element of mystery, of unknown to it, of something happened in the forest or just after the forest. You were able to kick it in, had this confidence, and you carried that with you through the rest of the races and in your life. So I'm like, so what happened? What was it? Was it the speech? Was it the rain? Was it you just randomly felt good and turned it? Like, what was it?
Yeah, I mean, so it's funny because I've usually thought about it as just this mystery moment where I kind of connected with the universe and something happened. I think if I break it down, I actually have read, I've read some like sports psychology books. Mm-hmm. And there's a guy, he was a outfielder for the Cubs. I think his last name is McKinney. He wasn't like that. He wasn't like an all-star or anything. But he kind of has this belief that, most athletes, it's all preparation. It's these moments of preparation for a handful of moments of excellence. Mm-hmm. And if you ask most athletes like what they're most proud of in their life, whether they're a high school athlete like I was, or an NCAA athlete, or even you talk to Olympians, you talk to professional athletes, almost no one really remembers like the trophy or the medal or like getting first place. It's kind of being in that flow state where they were excellent. And it's like time slows down. I can remember the details. I can remember like...
What do you remember?
I remember as we were running, the rain cleared up and it got sunny. I remember the dirt on the path in the forest being a little like darker. Then when we came out of the forest, it was like drier dirt. I remember, like running by my teammate on the 7th flight.
These details of your environment that are kind of burned into your memory.
Yeah, it's like I was just kind of more aware. There was more attention. There was something so profound that all the even small details have kind of stayed with me, and I can recreate that scene. And so this guy in the Cubs, like he had this attitude of the wins and losses don't matter, right? Because fundamentally, when you play sports, what are you taught? Like, you got to win the game, right? That was an attitude I had in high school. Like, I have to get first place. Mm-hmm. I have to be the top student.
Mm-hmm. Competitive drive.
I have to be like success was winning, and I think when you really focus on something, the actual game you're playing doesn't matter as much. it's achieving excellence that matters.
Yeah.
And I've heard this from a lot of people in different amateur sports, professional sports, but then even it translates into business, it translates into politics. Like anytime I talk to someone who kind of really hits their stride in a profession, in a hobby, it could be in family life, it just, the notion of winning and losing disappears, right? And there's this more personal achievement, it is this connection with the universe people talk about.
I think about it in medicine, about practicing good medicine. Some people are not going to make it. Some are going to die. Did you do your best? Do everything you could? That's what you feel good about. Sometimes it's just their time, And so the focus isn't on who lives, who dies, did they get better, did they not? Because you don't have direct control over that. The focus is, did I truly practice good medicine? For example, same thing.
Yeah. Well, in your profession, you can't control. You don't even know who the patients are coming in, right? Like you go to work, you don't have this list of patients you're going to treat. You can't prepare for that. All you can prepare for is to be excellent as the waves are thrown at you, right? And I think that's like that's a lot of life. Like we can do our best to prepare for different scenarios, and then when we're presented them, you have to have the confidence and you have to find that inner strength to deal with the chaos.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm still obsessed about how did you flip that switch? What happened? What changed? So now what I'm hearing you say is you're saying, well, I figured out how to get into a flow state where you're focused on being your best. Maybe less so winning or losing, but practicing excellence and connecting with the universe and that kind of thing. And I get that. I can identify with that. It's like the antecedent to that is, how'd you get into that? And then afterwards, it sounds like you're not even conscious of, and they say that's how they describe it too. Oh, it was unconscious, right? Like the conscious brain isn't the one that's like, okay, I'm going to shoot the basket. I'm going to aim a little bit this way, and then I'm going to flick my like. No, you just do it.
Right.
It's that repetition plus getting into the zone. This like mysterious kind of almost kind of supra instinctual performance place,
Right.
There's some mystery to it. It's not just conscious brain behavior stuff. Like it integrates all, and there's all this mystery of the subconscious brain. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah.
You were able, but then the other thing is you were able to replicate it. So this was this moment.
Yeah.
Like a switch.
It was, and I've never even thought of it. That's why I love this show. Is I haven't thought about how it happened beyond in this mystical way. But one thing that comes to mind is my coach, Mr. Sear. One thing he told me after my junior year was he kind of sat me down and he said, like you go too hard every day, and if you're gonna make it to the next level, you have to learn how to like when to go hard and when to recover so you can go hard when you need to.
I see.
And like the act of controlling your intensity as opposed to just I am always
dialing it up maximum every time.
Right? And that I think, and so then we did some interval training that was really meant to internalize that. Like you're gonna learn how to turn on the speed. And I remember we would practice running at paces that it wasn't like go as hard as you can and then rest as much as you want.
It was control of the pace.
Right. And so
intentionally at this pace.
And then he knew that I had I was a numbers guy, I was a math guy. And so we're talking 1996, 97, he special ordered a heart rate monitor, right? This is way before the Apple Watch or anything, right? And so I would run with this like little, it looked like a little bar around my midsection.
Your little leash, your little tag.
And I was like the only one that did, like maybe there were like one or two other guys that did it, but like I was like the numbers guy.
And it was on your watch. You had a little watch.
You had a little watch that told you, yeah. And that helped me gain a sense of control over where I was. I kind of always had a sense of my pace.
I see.
And I think that allowed me to step out of, instead of being swept up in the moment, like, it's a race, just go hard.
Right, run out of gas.
It was like, okay, I'm choosing to run at a 5-minute pace. I'm choosing to go 5:15 right now, right? I'm choosing to like accelerate and decelerate. And that, I think, that sense of like getting unstuck from the waves of the world and actually choosing when to play, when to rest, that is a sense of control that I think has really helped in other parts of life too. And I think when I sense that I'm getting swept up in like forces bigger than I can control, I'll kind of I'll figure out a way to kind of, the equivalent of the heart rate monitor at work or, in some other situation.
How to pace yourself in other parts of your life.
Yeah.
So this coach knew you really well to know, to kind of, Shouvik, he's like this. I bet this will kind of help him to understand more about his body, how to pace himself, and then be a better runner.
Yeah.
And it translated to more than just cross country.
It did. And I think he had and I think a lot of good coaches understand that each person is got their own demons to battle.
Yeah. And
so there isn't a one-size-fits-all way to mentor or coach people, right? And cross-country runners by nature, working hard is not the problem, right? Like, you're by nature, like if you want to run miles,
you're not lazy,
right?
Like from the beginning.
Yeah, right. It's not a work ethic issue. It is a not getting psyched out. It's not grinding it out in a kind of mindless, like, here I'm just kind of.
There's absolutely strategy to it,
right?
When you stick with the pack versus breaking off and all that, yeah.
Right.
I think about a lot of my high school friends that did cross country, and like, what's that commercial from the NCAA? All these athletes, and less than 5% of them turn pro. 95% of NCAA athletes are going to go pro in something else. You remember that commercial? Anyway, I think about like all of us that did high school sports and all this stuff. Nobody was going to go pro. Like, this was never going to be a career. But look how much you learned, and how much it mattered to you developing as a person and character, and just kind of, I think part of it attests to the value of sports.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I don't think when I did it, I would have thought running would have shaped my character as much as it did. Like, I like to run, and I actually played tennis my freshman year, and I wasn't, I could see I wasn't going to make varsity. I wasn't going to be great, and I just naturally was a better runner. And then I kind of kept doing what I was better at. But I wouldn't have guessed that today, 20 years later, this is what I'd pick as my one moment.
That it
right?
would matter as much.
Yeah.
Another thing that I think about it is how, I think this is probably true for most of us, that we're capable of more than we perceive or that we believe in ourselves. So you tapped into this flow state at that one particular race, and then you won that race. You went on to set some of subsequently your best times and all that, and kind of your mind might have thought, oh, I'm a number whatever runner, and I run a 18-minute 5K or whatever your time was, and then you break through that. It's like and there's a collective part of it too, right? Breaking the 4-minute mile.
Yeah.
Nobody did it. One guy does it. All of a sudden, a bunch of people are doing it because they believe.
Yeah. Well, now that guy broke
wow, something's possible. Now they broke what?
The 2-hour marathon.
Yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah,
I'm not. But it's the same thing.
It's inconceivable someone could do that.
Exactly the point. And then that same thought, like, about yourself. Oh, I could never run a whatever.
Right.
5K. I think that's fascinating how you had this moment, and this is probably why you like this moment a lot too, is you kind of prove to yourself, wow, I can do this. Like, what else couldn't I do?
Right.
You know, and then that belief carried through your whole life. How powerful is that? And that just seeps through in all these other potential ways, from your business or school, or I could never go to Stanford, or I could never, you know, marry this kind of woman, or whatever, or have a business in X or whatever. And then it's like you have this data point, right? This example of, oh, no, I kicked ass one day on this race, and then after that I kicked a lot of ass. And that was a whole life of kicking ass, you know. You know what I mean? But like just part of like I think most of us, it's true for most of us, I think people listening to this, is that we're capable of more than we believe in ourselves. I think it's true for me too. And we have these moments where we prove the brain otherwise, and it opens up the possibilities.
Right. Was there a moment where you, have you told your moment to the audience?
Yes.
I don't mean to
at the
flip
time,
the tables.
yeah,
but yeah.
at the time that you and I are shooting this, it hasn't been released, but my moment will come out at the end of February.
Okay.
Is it next week? Yeah, it's next week, so it'll be out. It was a car accident in high school.
Wow.
Yeah, I almost died. It was pretty bad.
Yeah.
Tune in.
I will be
by the
tuning
time
in.
this is out,
That will have
look
already...
back. It'll be, it's the finale of season 1, so it's episode 26 of the show.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask you another question? I've actually never asked you this.
Depends on the question. Yeah, you can ask.
No, I've actually never asked. When did you decide to become a ER doctor?
I always wanted to be a doctor. At first, I thought I was going to be a cardiothoracic surgeon, some big alpha rich, you know, suburban happy white guy in Kansas City. But then I did residency in family medicine because I wanted to work in a hut in Africa and do Doctors Without Borders and be able to take care of the whole family, deliver a baby, take care of kids, mom, grandpa. And when I went to Tanzania, my third year residency, I was there for a month and worked in a hospital in rural Tanzania. It was crazy. So many kids died. It was hard. It was really hard. But I realized I wasn't very good diagnosing disease without technology, without CAT scans and labs. And you just don't use that out there. And I thought to myself, oh, if I worked in the ER on the front line in the US, where people come in and they have a cough, and I'm like, is this cough just a cold? Is it pneumonia? Is it, you know, heart failure? And then I got better at diagnosing things, you know, even though I did have the technology, I'd be a better doctor, take care of sick people. And that instinct was right. That was kind of that moment that I was like, God, I got to do ER. I'm just not as good with sick people without it. Mm-hmm. Looking back on it, I don't want this to be too much about me. It's about you, baby. You're the guest. Looking back on it, my accident in high school, where I was a patient, and I almost died in trauma, like, it's no coincidence that I ended up in a profession that was on the exact opposite side of that. Like, that's got to have a lot to do with it, feeling like I can give to people what in a moment I wasn't able to do for myself. Like, there's some kind of traumatic control, and there's a whole thing around that for me, for sure.
Yeah.
So, okay. So you have this moment. Where are we at with time?
Right at the middle, 33.
Okay.
Break if you want.
Do you want to take a break?
I'm fine.
Yeah.
Fine, yeah.
Let's keep going.
Keep going? Cool.
Yeah. So you have because I still want to talk about Averpoint, and I want to get into your next moment. So you get into this flow state with your cross country and take it to the next level in a lot of ways, and that sounds like carried through a lot of your life afterwards, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What are other ways off the track that you feel like that kind of gave you a confidence in life or affected you after?
Yeah, I think in school, I mean, after that, you know, went off to college, grad school. I remember, like, my friends would make fun of me because I would, before exams, I'd listen to my pre-race soundtrack, and I'd approach every exam
Before
like a race.
test.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And I kind of had this soundtrack that if I heard it, it could kind of put me in that mindset, and I could perform at a higher level.
In a flow statey kind of thing.
Kind
this
of,
is you
yeah.
tapping into that confidence.
Yeah. And maybe it was just a placebo effect or whatever, but it became a tradition of mine, like before a big exam, to listen to that soundtrack.
What are some of the things on that soundtrack?
I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, so Eye of the Tiger, right, Top Gun, the Braveheart soundtrack.
Oh,
right?
I listen to all of them on a regular basis.
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. I think occasionally Last
Danger
of the Mohicans.
Zone.
Yeah, of course, Danger Zone.
It's so funny. I've got all the same stuff.
Right. Yeah.
I have a Pandora station of Braveheart, Last of the Mohicans. I've definitely got the Top Gun stuff.
Yeah. Right. I mean, and that's the soundtrack of our, kind of our sub-generation.
Yeah.
That really kind of gets us going. And then I think like for a couple job interviews, I like even listened to going into the interview.
When do you tap into that soundtrack now?
It's funny now, not that often, to be honest.
No.
When I do, the new song, like the song that kind of replaced a lot of that is the Eminem song, like "Lose Yourself."
Oh, wow.
And I'll,
Dun, 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 dun. Yeah.
yeah, the music, the moment, right? And I think,
Mom spaghetti.
yeah, and I think that that song is
You got a chance. Dun, dun, dun.
yeah, and I think the closest thing now I have to like a moment where I have to really step it up is actually, like you spoke about Kaj, like CrossFit. CrossFit. Like the nice thing about CrossFit, I think the best thing about CrossFit for me is compared to just being in the gym or going for a run, like it does put you in that like high intensity, like the equivalent of
Competitive.
race space.
Yeah.
But it's not competitive with your gym, or it shouldn't be. And like the gym that we all go to, that's a big value is you're not competing with the other athletes. And I think keeping that muscle alive for me is the most important thing I get from CrossFit. It's not so much, the conditioning is actually very good, and I could talk hours about that, but I think, I'm about to turn 40. You reach a point in life where, you're not regularly doing races, and you're not regularly like mentally putting yourself in your peak condition and performing at that high level. And this gives you a chance to do that 3-4 days a week.
You like that outlet. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the outlet, but I also like exercising that muscle, that mental muscle 3-4 times a week.
Yeah, I get it. You got a second moment?
I do, and that relates more to what I'm doing now, and it maybe with your your expertise here, I could figure out if there's some connection between the two. But
Maybe. It's a nice sweater you've got, by the way.
Oh, okay. We should do the sweater.
Where'd you get that sweater?
We should go deep on sweaters.
Where'd you get the idea to get that sweater? What do those lines mean on that sweater? Looks like a rope to me.
Yeah. Well, the story of the sweater is, my last several jobs, I was moving around a lot, which I know. I mean, you're running around at your job in the ER, but my last, the last several jobs I had, I was running around a lot. But the current job I have, I'm doing my own startup. I'm actually sitting a lot, and half of the time I was in San Francisco. Now I'm in Southern California, where it's a little warmer. But my body temperature just drops, and I was literally like, my hands were turning blue because I'm sitting there. I'm like writing code, or
You're
I'm like
cold because you're not moving.
I'm not moving for hours at a time, and working long days, and I was just always freezing. And I'm wearing like a North Face fleece, which is like made of polyester and like some synthetic material, wearing a cotton t-shirt. That was my whole wardrobe. And so on my honeymoon, we went to New Zealand. and I told my wife I don't spend a lot of money on clothes, but I'm like, I want to get a wool sweater. I just, I'm going to New Zealand, and her parents actually went to New Zealand when they were in their 20s and bought a nice wool sweater that to this day her dad still wears. And it's kind of like, you buy high quality stuff, like it'll cost a little more, but it'll last a little more.
Yeah.
And so then I went down there, came back with 2 wool sweaters actually, and it totally changed my day to day. I'm like, I'd be wearing.
Now you're a sweater guy.
I'd be wearing these sweaters. I put away I retired the tech bro uniform.
That's what
right?
It sounded like. It's like very how San Francisco tech of you.
Right. So put aside the North Face and Patagonia and started wearing these more like classic sweaters. And then for Christmas this year, I started researching like sweaters. Just started getting into it. And then,
old, dude.
Yeah, and then I started going down the deep end of like where the sweater comes from, the history of sweaters, why wool keeps you warmer than other materials. What are like synthetic variants of it? Like Patagonia does some recycled wool. I could talk your ear off about it, but what this sweater represents.
You sure could, Grandpa.
I definitely could. And what this sweater represents and why I wanted to wear it on the show is this is called an Aran stitch sweater, Aran or Aran.
Okay.
It's from the Aran Isles in Ireland. So these are these islands on the western coast of Ireland.
Okay.
Kind of the middle latitude.
Aran Isles.
The Aran Isles, yeah.
The Aran Isles.
And the centuries ago, basically these fishermen would go off to find fish, come back to feed their families, and their wives would stitch these very thick sweaters, and then they learned the weavers developed these like special skills to put different patterns, and so the patterns represent different things, and the different groups and tribes and clans could understand looking at your sweater, like who you were, what you represented.
Almost a coat of arms.
Almost a coat of arms, but for fishermen, just peaceful, hardworking fishermen. And this particular sweater has honeycombs, which represents that you're a hard worker. You're a worker bee. You're not a aristocrat, just kind of like, living off the serfs. And then it has diamonds, which represents that through your hard work, you will find fortune and riches. And, I think when I think about our friendship and our approach to life, I think we both work incredibly hard and we both want to be successful, but in a way that doesn't manipulate, kiss up, kick down. And through our hard work, not through our manipulation, we achieve something.
Yeah.
Right? And so I love that story. And I think that made me want to get this sweater, and it's turned out to be a very warm, good purchase. And then now when I look around, I see that it's actually a pattern that a lot of people have these sweaters, and it's kind of like subconsciously like kind of spread.
Do I have that pattern here, or is it what pattern? Do you know what this is? Do I have some honeycomb in there?
I think what you have here is the rope pattern.
Yeah.
And I forget what the rope pattern means, but I'm gonna riff that I think it means that like the community, like you tie the knots.
The intertwining
of community, right? And these fishermen all came from strong communities, and then the communities are what helped them kind of survive despite like British invasions and being kind of out on their own.
Sweater life.
Yeah. So and so you need little things to inspire you to get through the workday.
I like that you feel like you're wearing some deeply held values in your sweater.
Yes, I try, as do you.
I'll look up what the rope means.
Yeah, but to the Aran Isles. I'll say one more interesting fact about this. So
It's fascinating. It really is.
Yeah,
I didn't know that there was actually a history behind the designs here. I thought it was just yarn and like.
Well, I was just buying something on sale at the Banana Republic rack, but it turns out something to it.
Well, yeah, and this one is actually stitched in Ireland. Like, the wool is from like Irish sheep. And so this whole process, like I went like way too deep in this, and I think I told you like, you turn on the news and things
Your
get
words,
so
not mine.
depressing. I just will shift and start like researching interesting like things that are more positive. And it's actually quite interesting that every culture has their own way of keeping warm, and it could be wool, it could be furs, it could be jute in India. There are cultures that will like what you make rope from. Use jute. It could be silk. There's thick ways of weaving silk, but there's this whole history, like, because clothing is one of the basic human needs. So the sweater actually goes. It originated from these fishermen, Ireland, Scotland, parts of England, and then it became a popular fashion thing. The aristocrats saw the commoners wearing it, and then they developed their own wool sweaters, and they're more finer wools, more finer ways of wearing the wool, crew neck sweaters, so they could have a little tie. And then in the Norwegian cultures and in Iceland, they have their own patterns of doing it also. But in all of this, all these different European immigrants came to America, and then Americans developed their own kind of wool, American companies that made wool sweaters, and then globalization happened. And today it is almost impossible to find an American sweater company that makes the sweater in America. There's some like smaller brands, but they're like tiny. They barely have a website. But like Pendleton, Brooks Brothers, LL Bean, all their sweaters are made in China. And then, for better or worse, they're cheaper, but there is this kind of, a lot of people are talking today of the loss of manufacturing in America. So I was like looking around, and I was like, you could see the price difference. Like a made in China sweater with American label, a made in Ireland sweater with an Irish label, and then like it goes from there. But it's something pretty powerful to think about, that all these traditions have developed around clothing. And you can go even deeper on this topic, but I know that's
This is what the 24-hour news cycle has pushed you to, pushed your mind, the rabbit holes down where you go.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's talked about sweater history on here, so that's
well,
a
hey,
first.
it's a first.
That is a first.
You never know what you're gonna get,
Tell me your second moment, sweater boy.
Okay, so the second moment was, so I spent 10 years working on clean energy and different ways.
Solar.
Solar was where I ended up focusing my last 4 years. But I was in grad school, and I couldn't figure out where to focus.
You're a Stanford guy.
Stanford undergrad.
You went to Harvard's public policy school.
I did. I went to the Harvard Kennedy School for my master's, and I remember, you had to pick a concentration, and I remember I was like, after a semester, that's when you had to start to focus after you got your prereqs done, and I made a list of like the issues, the problems in the world that I wanted to affect, and they were climate change, terrorism. I mean, this is a few years after 9/11.
Yeah.
And global poverty.
Wow.
And I was like, okay.
Small things.
I was like, look, if I want to pick a concentration at a public policy school, I should start with what are the big problems, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, why don't I think of what the big problems are, and then let me think of, this is not my moment, by the way. And so then I was like, okay, with energy, I can actually attack all three of these issues. If you got energy right, you could reduce climate change, reduce terrorism, and reduce poverty. And so I was like, this seems like a silver bullet in some ways.
Underlying issue, foundational issue.
It's a foundational issue, right? And so I ended up working on it for 10 years. Ended up working at McKinsey, in the White House, the DOE, Department of Energy, and then at Solar City, Elon Musk's solar company, which then Elon bought from Elon, like Tesla bought Solar City, so now it's rolled into the larger Tesla company. And so when I finished up my time at Solar City, I was kind of looking around. I was 35 and I was single at the time. And I was like, what should I do next? I had a couple job opportunities at other solar companies that my job would have been maybe one degree different than what I was already doing professionally.
Yeah.
Maybe the responsibility changed a little bit, the title changed a little bit, but it was going to be an incremental move. And when I stepped back and I thought, I've been 10 years working on this issue from a lot of different angles. And what I kept coming back to is we're stuck, not because of technology, not because of financing, but because of bad information. The deception that people were hearing about climate change not being real. Misinformation, and a variant of it is disinformation. Misinformation means, you might just have a mistake. A reporter may have misheard someone, reported incorrectly. Disinformation was a word coined by Joseph Stalin, and it actually means let me consciously deceive you to achieve a political goal.
Intentionally deceptive propaganda, if you will.
Yeah. Double speak, yeah.
That's George Orwell, right? That was 1984.
Exactly. And Orwell, I think is quite prescient. But I kind of looked at that and I'm like, I'm going to be running up against this issue. If I do an incremental move, I'm going to keep running into this issue. Also, Solar City went public. It put me in a position where if I didn't live extravagantly, I could take a bit of a risk. And I was single. I didn't have any mouths to feed. And so I was kind of torn. And, my parents are immigrants. They don't like the idea of like not having cash flow or taking a huge risk, even though they took big risks coming to this country. But I kind of wasn't sure what to do. And so I had these 2 job offers. And I told them, I was like, look, I'm not ready to like jump back in and do like this role, and I can't give it 110%.
You wanted to make a bigger difference.
So I actually negotiated some time. They said take some time to figure things out, and then I went traveling, and I spent 3 months on the road. So I call that my 90 days of glory. I ended up visiting.
What kind of glory did you come into, sir?
Well, I spent 12 weeks on the road and visited 9 countries, and I wanted to use that time to kind of separate from the life that I was kind of living. I was in a very good routine in San Francisco, but it was a routine, right? It was kind of automatic. I'd wake up, I had a gym, I'd get in my car, I'd go to a job, I'd come back, I'd see my friends.
Sure.
And I realized that I'd kind of ossified, or I was like not...
Stagnant. You weren't growing.
I wasn't growing, and I was moving in a linear way. And I was thinking about my potential in a linear way. And so on this trip, I was able to like kind of peel back enough layers and realize I'm 35, like I can do almost anything. And so I had my laptop and I took so I was a computer science and a history major at Stanford, but I hadn't written any code.
Computer science and history, okay.
And I went to college during the .com bubble, and then it burst right when I graduated. And I hadn't written a line of code since 2007, since I finished grad school.
Been a while.
But during those 3 months, I just kind of, as a challenge while I was traveling, I was like, let me take a few online courses and see if I can like relearn this. And then it was in Spain where I kind of felt, talking about the confidence, I felt like I'd gotten to a point where I could try something new. First of all, I felt like I had the skills to go try something in the world, try to start a technology company. The other thing that I realized was that, that misinformation, disinformation, the thing that was blocking progress in clean energy, there were business models that you could build to solve it. right? Certain problems you can only regulate away. You need government to come in and do something about it, right? Certain problems maybe the nonprofit sector can come and fix, but there's no business model to fix it. So you have to rely on other ways. But I did see a business opportunity to fight disinformation. And when those two things clicked, and it happened when I was in southern Spain, Andalusia, and that is kind of a magical place, right? That's the setting of The Alchemist. It's close to where Don Quixote and some famous idealists have.
Where is
hung
Andalusia?
out.
I feel like I may have went there, but I can't.
Andalusia,
Is it in southern Spain?
southern Spain. It's where Seville and Granada are.
I've been to Seville and Granada. Is it the state?
It's
or
the
it's
region.
Another city? It's a region.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, it's a region.
Yeah, I went to both of those.
Yeah, and you're a little away from like the big cities like Madrid and Barcelona.
Yeah.
But you're also not in like kind of Mediterranean paradise, right? Like Ibiza.
Yeah.
You're in this kind of other magical world of palaces, and it's a little old timey. And there's knights and there's tales and I
So
think
you're in this inspirational place in this time. I see.
I'm in this inspirational place that let me think bigger, because Silicon Valley is a place that gave birth to all these big companies, but I wasn't thinking big there, and I could tell I wasn't thinking big.
Why?
I was
You had
just,
to get away.
I was in a routine. I was thinking incrementally,
You had to get away.
and then getting away, changing my environment, putting myself in a place that at least for me was inspirational.
Yeah.
Made me think I could do something bigger and attack something bigger. And then the confidence came, and then the idea came, and then now I'm like 4 years later still working on this project.
I mean, this is like exactly
clearly-
about the same as his running story.
As I'm saying it, I'm maybe seeing there's something similar, but it's funny. I never actually made the
Maybe
connections.
seeing
Yeah.
there's something similar. It's like the most obvious. So wait a minute. So you're in. Let me just reflect what I'm hearing. You're in Andalusia, Spain, in a transition time in your life where you've worked for solar for 10 years, doing something you believe in, and you said two things came together. I didn't quite hear the one, but the second one was you saw a way with business to solve a problem. To solve this problem, you felt like if you would have continued in solar at maybe the next promotion up job or whatever, that you would have still run into the same problem of disinformation, that was the biggest thing holding back really what you saw to be the next step in a better world. What were the two things that came together in that place for you?
Well, the other was during this 12-week journey, I had my laptop, and I just kind of spent an hour or two every day taking
You
like
got back
refresher
into
coding classes. Yeah.
So what was it about this time and space for you, this like getting away, that enabled you to figure out the next thing you wanted to do in your life?
That allowed me to get. I think.
Tell me
Yeah.
more about that region. What do you remember?
About Andalusia.
Yeah.
Um,
What did it look like? What were you doing every day?
yeah. Well, okay. Well, one thing was in Barcelona, I had met up with a friend, and then I went to Ibiza where I met up with my cousin and all of his friends. So the first two cities I went to, I was with a ton of people. And then I went to Madrid, and I was solo. So I had 3 nights in Madrid by myself, going to museums, checking out Picasso.
Yeah.
And I was kind of beginning to, it's very emotional to see some of Picasso's works that you've studied in school, but to see them up front.
It's an experience.
It's an experience, and I had no idea. And then like Goya, like is it the 5th of May, or like I forget the painting where Napoleon's forces, I think, are shooting Spanish rebels.
I don't remember the name. Yeah.
But like, there are these moments. There are these things I've seen in textbooks that are like that big, and then you go there and they're like the whole wall.
Sistine Chapel.
And you're just immersed in it, and you feel connected to humanity.
Yeah. You feel inspired.
You feel inspired.
The inverse of that too is in the textbook, and it's the biggest thing in the textbook, and then it's a postage stamp.
Yeah.
Like the Mona Lisa.
Well, actually, that's true. Yeah, that's true. The Mona Lisa is like a lot smaller than you would expect. But I think in Madrid, which is not Andalusia, but it still gave me a. I started thinking along the lines of, like, you're seeing like individuals like Picasso who kind of went against the grain and did things that to this day inspire people and created something out of nothing, and that felt much more noble and honorable than doing something linear. And you know, the job I had and the job I was going to get did feel very. It had a very like corporate war type mentality, and it was more about beating other solar companies than about building something and creating something new. And you have to do that to build a good business. But what it did to me personally was it made me a different person. It made me very competitive and angry at the other solar companies, right? And like they're doing a good thing too, right? And that's kind of where solar was. Like through competition, costs were coming down, and that needed to happen. But it didn't feel like anything would happen major until the disinformation thing got fixed. So it just kind of inspired me to think bigger than you do when you wake up every day and do your routine. Mm-hmm. And then Andalusia, like now I'm leaving the capital of Spain, I'm on this train, and I remember seeing a lot more open spaces as you leave a city. It's rural, it was drier. And then these are old cities that, they're palaces, and I think these cities were settled by the Moors.
And so I remember the history of there's a intersection of European Catholicism and Islam in southern Spain.
And the architecture there is very
reflects that,
distinct. I remember like something about it was so. It was I've studied that period in history classes, but it was very
came to life,
palatial, and you saw these like big ideas, big ambitions, and people building palaces out of thin air. Actually, in Madrid, I think I did a day trip to Toledo, where Don Quixote and Cervantes was inspired. And not that I want to be.
So you're in this setting where you're again in this transition period, and you go into kind of a magical place in Spain, and you get inspired by the experience of the art of Picasso and so forth. You go to these places that have historical significance, and you're out of a history book. You're actually more experiencing this by being there and seeing it. And so you get into this place, and that kind of gets you to tap into something you much more want to be and do than just the corporate solar competitive life and guy that it didn't sound that inspired you very much. In that setting, you start coding again, and you get this idea, I'm going to start a tech company to fight
do my part in fighting disinformation. And I think I wouldn't want to say I was inspired working on solar, but I think like the trip helped me.
Sounds like a different kind of inspiration you're talking about.
Well, I think
trip.
What the trip did was help me see that the battles to be fought, like when you're in the moment and you're going to a meeting and you're on a conference call, like you're like I'm all in. I'm trying to achieve the goal of the meeting or the call, but I had gotten too micro going in and out of that, right? And like even if I had achieved all my goals, and if I'd helped my company achieve all its goals,
still be limited by.
We were still going to live in a world where you have people saying climate change is a hoax, where you have,
that disinformation limiting.
The disinformation
holding you guys back.
Yeah, and then it felt like, look, if I'm not going to solve anything by myself, or it's not delusions of grandeur, but if I'm going to contribute, if I have skills and if I have the appetite for risk, this may be the last time I take a job before I have children, before I have a wife.
Now's the time.
Now is a time I can take a calculated risk, and the problem I want to deal with is one step before climate change, before clean energy. It's how we believe things. It's how we trust information, and hopefully get to a better place in marketing and politics.
And you saw a way where you felt like this was possible.
I did, yeah. I felt it kind of came together. A lot of these thoughts were in my head, and I did go into it hoping, that was the decision I was trying to figure out, was do I want to do a startup? That was, the first question was startup or go work at a company. The second question was stay in clean tech, which I had done for 10 years and I had built some expertise, or figure something else out, a different direction. And I think both of those things got answered.
Do you remember the particular moment when that happened? What you were doing, or where were you, or where you clenched it, you said, yep, this is what I'm doing next?
I'd say, because I was traveling solo the last 12 days of that trip, it was probably in Madrid, so actually even before I got to Andalusia, where I had no one to talk to. So I'd kind of go see museums, and then I was just kind of in this hotel room by myself, like learning how to code and like thinking, writing like little memos to myself. And the downtime was, it created that, it's the fortress of solitude. It was the alone time, which I hadn't had most of the trip, because most of the trip I was visiting people or traveling with people.
You were with your cousin or whoever else.
Yeah, I think the threads of thinking were all there, and they tied together.
Came together. You got that clarity.
When
Alone.
Right. And I'm not an advocate of being alone too long, because I think that's how.
Yeah, but you got that came to you.
It came to me
when you were alone and you had that.
Exactly, and then from there, the idea started to take shape, and like I started like sketching different things I could try, and then I started to realize like what I needed to learn, where the gaps were between where I was and where I needed to be to start.
Did you feel like it was kind of crazy to come up with this idea and be like, God, can I even accomplish this thing? Is this even possible? Or are you just like, no, I'm going to do this. Is what I want to do. I'm going to do it.
Yeah, I just felt like I'm going to do it. And when I came back to the U.S. and I started telling people, that's when people were like, this is crazy. Like it didn't seem crazy to me until I came back to reality, like it came back to my life.
You just believed it was you could do it. And so that was the birth of Averpoint.
Yeah.
Tell me what that is. Tell these guys what Averpoint is.
Well, so Averpoint's our grand vision is to we're trying to build a decentralized standard of trust, a grassroots standard of trust online. So when you see information, what makes you trust it? I mean, in the 20th century, it was because some organization put its stamp of approval on it. The U.S. government, NBC News,
the New York Times.
The New York Times. So it could be media, it could be government, it could be religion. Religion has controlled and filtered information for most of human history, for a lot of human history. It could be
your trusted doctor who runs an incredible
experts, yeah,
podcast.
Exactly. And so I did a lot of reading, and a lot of this goes back to the early 20th century. I think you've probably heard me pontificate on this, but there's two figures that really struck me. One is Edward Bernays, and the other is Walter Lippmann. So Bernays is the nephew of Sigmund Freud, and he was an American, and he is the father of public relations. He was the
PR.
He was the PR advisor to most of the major corporations at one point or another.
In the early 1900s?
Well, he lived to be 100, so he was alive throughout most of the 20th century.
Okay.
But PR wasn't a profession, it wasn't a thing, and he turned it into a thing. And then Walter Lippmann is considered the father of modern journalism. And what both of them believed was that society had gotten too complicated for the New England town hall meeting, direct democracy.
Yeah.
And you needed
To simplify.
the way, and then also psychology had shown people how the brain works. The brain simplifies. Lippmann actually coined the word stereotype. So we shape things, we use patterns to interpret the world. So we don't see facts and then form conclusions.
See them as you are.
We have conclusions and reinforce them with facts.
Bias.
Confirmation bias. And the two of them were two of many thinkers at that time who said, we need to establish a technocratic elite, a group of neutral people, ideally neutral people, who will filter the information, simplify the information, and help each group interpret the other groups. So it could be labor and management, it could be different sectors of the economy, it could be doctors and patients, but there was too much knowledge, it was too difficult, the brain was too yearning for something simple, and so you needed these elite players to help us understand each other.
Solve those problems, sure.
And they thought they were doing something very noble in preventing conflict. Without groups understanding each other, there's going to be conflict between labor and management, which happened a lot in the 20th century, between races, which happened in the 20th century, between countries, which happened in a big way in the two world wars. And then, there's one big flaw in that theory. What if the elite is self-serving, right?
What if they want to use those tools and principles to manipulate to their own gain?
Or, and filter the information in a way that helps themselves. So I would say 80-90% of if you were going to grade the technocratic elite, they basically ran the world for a century. They did great things. They, particularly after World War II, they did great things. They prevented a World War III. They brought billions of people out of poverty. They spread democracy, education. They eradicated diseases. But the big thing, and we're talking a lot about this as a culture now on both sides, the left and the right, that the elite people in charge who were filtering things, pulling the strings, simplifying things, were self-dealing. So there were, although 9 out of 10 doctors were simplifying things in a good way, there were many doctors who actually advertised...
The snake oil salesman.
Yeah.
Quacks.
Doctors for cigarettes.
Exactly, right? All those kinds of things. And so then you had this period, the last 20 years, where the internet suddenly let anyone say anything. And it became more like the early 20th century or late 19th century when there were just tons of newspapers everywhere. And who wins in the Wild West? Who wins when there's no filter? Well, it turns out that, so when I graduated college, I was very believed in this Jeffersonian ideal of truth. Jefferson has this line, truth is great and will prevail if left to herself. Hands off, let people debate, and the truth will emerge.
Almost sounds naive now.
And it turns out that so getting deep into psychology, like there's the fast brain and the slow brain. And if you manipulate the fast brain, you can trigger people and get them to do what you want. And without the elite filters, making sure we get good information, who's winning? It's the people that can best trigger our emotions.
Conspiracy theories, viral posts,
Yeah.
anti-vaxxers.
And using data, you can figure out what does Larry think? What does he like? How do I trigger his emotions, good and bad, and associate them with my product?
Oh, how do you play me?
My candidate.
Oh, wow.
And in subtle ways, get your vote, get your sale. And we've shifted from
the power of Facebook, huh?
Right. And we've shifted from the technocratic elite to the grassroots triggers, the grassroots emotional triggers. So what Averpoint's trying to create is the grassroots filter. So we're trying to do what Rotten Tomatoes does for movies to messages that get you to buy products and vote for things, vote for people. And imagine a world where as you're presented persuasive messages to buy products, vote for candidates, there is something like Rotten Tomatoes that tells you this is more trustworthy. This is something I can believe. And if we are successful at doing that, then what we're helping the honest guys and the honest girls win more often. So today, MIT did a study of every tweet between 2006 and 2016 and found that lies spread 6 times faster than truths in every domain. Not just politics, which we would believe, but in medicine,
Oh,
in
absolutely.
sports, in business, in stocks. And so, you know, a lie has an advantage over a truth, which is a lie can be perfectly optimized for the fast brain, the things that our fast brain wants to believe, our tribes, our filters, our confirmation bias. Whereas the truth, it can use those things to try to like sell a message, but it still is stuck with like, it has to be real. And so, you know,
It's inherently less appealing, maybe.
well, it's limited, right? It's you can have the icing on the cake, but you still need some nutritious stuff too. You need the data, you need to be grounded in reality.
Yeah.
Whereas a lie can just be totally made up, right? And so lies spread faster than truth.
It's terrifying.
It's terrifying, and so we're trying to kind of like a vaccine, or you know, to inoculate people. We have this kind of fast brain. We have this symbol that your fast brain can recognize.
I see.
And know that,
Your
okay,
Averpoint stamp of approval, this is more trustworthy and
this
likely
writer,
to be legitimate.
this company, this candidate played by a set of rules that make them more trustworthy. They used facts. They made those facts open to grassroots fact checking. They allowed other people to suggest new facts to counterbalance cherry picking. And when they're wrong, they updated themselves. Those are the 4 things you have to do. And what we're, you know, if we're successful, and it's a chicken or egg thing, trying to get people to do this and then the audience to trust it, and we've been going back and forth. But ultimately, if honest people are winning 10% of the time, you know, like after I fired all my shots, and someday when I meet my maker, you know, if I can say honest people are winning 20% of the time, 30% of the time, and if I played a role in changing that ratio, and maybe lies spread 3 times fast, like I don't think anyone's going to fix it. But if lies spread, you know, 3 times faster instead of 6 times faster,
if you make a contribution to this thing,
yeah, I think that's
the big picture.
That's kind of that's a big contribution.
So one of the ways that you told me this works, I want to spell this out for people, is you're reading an article in the New York Times or on my website or whatever, and there's some fact presented, and then maybe there's a little citation, a little 1 or 2 by it. And people can click on that, and it goes to your website that says, here's the piece of evidence that backs up this statement. And then this Averpoint, throughout that article, may have various citations, and it goes back to this thing where people can then review the research and see this particular author who has a whole lot of other stuff. Or that's one of the ways that it works.
That's one of the ways, yeah. And we've built it to really work with text and video right now, and we want to add podcast and social media too.
So only just because I want to give people an idea of how it works, because I was watching this thing. It was an interview on Bloomberg, and you're watching it, and there were 6 little dots down on the kind of tracker, you know, the 5-minute interview. Like let's say there was a dot every minute, and you touch the dot, and then it pulls up a citation of, it's like, well, Bloomberg said this, and it's like, here's the facts on what he did historically as the mayor of New York City, for example. And so then you have this is the way that Averpoint in a video brings up this evidence and this citation to bounce back off of, is what he's saying true, or what's the history and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so he can show why he thinks he's correct. You as the audience, you can see it, but you can also review it. So you can review it using these grassroots.
You can interact with it.
You can interact with it.
Oh,
right?
this is BS. That's bullshit. Yeah.
Right. So you can, if the statement is just straight up not true.
This thing would just, if this happened, like it would just collapse Trump. I'll say it out loud.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't know your audience. I've tried not to show my leanings, but
No, it would take down the liars.
It would take down the liars,
Yeah.
and what I'd say is it would reduce the rate at which the liars are winning. Let's put it that way, right? Like
Any kind of roadblocks right now, they're like completely unencumbered. They have free reign to say whatever they want with zero consequences.
Oh, I mean
because the cycle that it takes to get to the truth is an investigative process. If that process is limited in any kind of way, then people can get there faster, and the lie can't
This is
metastasize in the
this-
way that it does currently.
Exactly.
Let me give you an example in my world. So I
Need you.
I go on. I went on the news to talk about the vaping thing.
Yeah.
When a story broke months ago about people started dying from doing e-cigarettes, and I did some Google research, and I would type in vaping deaths or whatever, and in Google, like the first 5 or whatever things were all BS things. That's like, oh, look how safe vaping is. Oh, vaping can get you off cigarettes. Oh, whatever. Clearly driven by the companies that have vaping products that know, oh, here comes some bad press. We're going to flood the internet and Google with disinformation because we want people to feel safe that vaping is okay. When there was these alarming deaths of young people where there was something clearly in the vapes that were killing people. And so I saw firsthand, I was like, wow, like average people are Googling this and they're getting blatantly deceptive lies.
Right.
And it wasn't subtle. It wasn't like, oh, there was one article in there. It was like the whole first page of Google had been played,
Right.
And I was like, oh, you can't trust Google. It's okay, but seeing that, I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Like the first 5 things were all like, here's why vaping's okay. Here's why vaping's good. Here's why whatever. And I was just like, ah! Like what should pop up is, hey, you should be worried about vaping right now because young people are dying. And that's not what we were getting.
Right.
That's disturbing.
Yeah. So you can optimize the search algorithm with enough search words. And so it's interesting because there's a lot of people working on this problem, and it's going to take a lot of different solutions. But I put broadly, there's people that are trying to find bad news and flag it, and so they're trying to help you see that something's bad. And what we're trying to do is help you see that a message is good. So we're trying to help you see that when Dr. Larry's giving you medical advice, you can trust him because he plays by these 4 rules. And if you think about that, that takes the audience to first believe that those 4 factors make someone trustworthy, and then enough people start to actually look for that. But our view is, first of all, you need both. You need to detect the bad information. But our view is that it's a lot easier if my proposition to you is, look, you already have a lot of research behind the things you say on TV, the things you write on your blog. With doing no extra work, we can help you link your content to that research, have people verify it, end up trusting you more. If we can help you get trusted more for what you're already doing, we're trying to find the honest voices out there and just kind of give them a stamp.
Well, to keep this advertisement using this,
Yeah.
For me, it was a nice place to collect and have studies. So I'm looking at a study, I'm like, oh, here's one on vaping that shows, which substances they've got out of bronchoscopy that's proving that it's this chemical that seems to be the thing that's killing people. I clicked like a button and then it goes wham and it puts it right on that thing in Averpoint. And I was like, oh, this is way easier than me cutting and pasting and putting this on a Google Doc or whatever I was doing before. So it's actually convenient, especially if you're an evidence-based person that's trying to put an article together. So if you're somebody like that, check it out. How would they check you out?
So go to averpoint.com. You'll see a sign-up link that'll walk you through. We'll verify your email.
Why don't you tell them? If people want to check out Averpoint and sign up, let's just do this thing.
Okay.
If people want to if they're interested in Averpoint and want to use it, what would they do?
So go to averpoint.com. You can watch videos, read articles that are linked to points, so you get a feel for what it's like to consume content with verified research and trust someone more in a world where you're skeptical of everything you read and view. And if you're inspired at that point, you can sign up for Averpoint, which will let you review the facts, link to the content yourself.
Participate and engage in the process.
Participate. You can follow experts like Dr. Larry. So when Larry points a fact in an article, you'll get a notification. You can get a daily digest if you opt into it. And then at some point, if you yourself want to do research on Averpoint, you can download our Chrome extension. And then as you browse the web and you find articles and videos and PDFs with facts on the topic you're an expert in, with a few clicks, you grab the information, it saves to your Averpoint collections, which kind of look like Pinterest for the topic you're an expert at. And that's kind of, those are the steps. You can view content with us, you can interact with the research with us, and if you are a truly active user, you get our Chrome extension and you add to our set
That
of
was
research.
the thing that was really easy, was that Chrome extension. It's like a click or something and bam, it's there. It's convenient.
Yeah,
It's
and
nice.
that's right. And so a lot of this is a two-sided problem. There's an audience and there's a content creator. And so any two-sided marketplace, you got to figure out how do you get the chicken or the egg first.
Yeah.
And so what we've said is, why don't we deliver a lot of convenience to the researcher?
Yeah.
Research is a tough process. I remember writing my thesis, being in a library with dusty books, having 100 tabs open on my computer. So we've tried to make that process super easy.
I think it's helpful.
And
I think it's worth trying.
yeah, please give it a try.
Yeah. Where else can people find you? Averpoint? Is that where we want them to go? Averpoint.com?
Yeah, sign up for Averpoint, and then I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook. My email.
Where do you want people to find you besides Averpoint? So you want them to go to averpoint.com,
Yeah.
and that's where you want them to find, or if you want to give some other contact.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love if you check us out, give our product a try, and if you want to send me your notes, just Shouvik@averpoint.com, SHOUVIK @averpoint.com. I check email compulsively, and I'm very responsive, and get in touch. And if you're in West LA, if you're a content creator with evidence and trying to get people better products, get people a better political message, get in touch.
This has been good. Close out the show. Tell them thanks for coming and see you later.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming. Thank you, Larry. Thanks to this show. I think it's very important that we reflect on these moments that change our lives, set our trajectories, and I think we can learn from each other. And I think if there's any takeaway I got from this, that there are really two major times in my life where in a few days or in a few hours, I gained clarity and confidence to go after something much bigger than I thought possible. And I think pushing people to think that way, like you are, is a service to individuals and a service to kind of our broader community. So
It was really fun to watch.
Thank
That
you.
was beautiful. That was incredible. Take a screenshot of that stuff. Put it on your social media. Tag me, Dr. Larry Burchett. I will respond. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts and the YouTube channel.
Try to tell it's a dramatic story. It's a big part of my life, and it became something where it's like I would have friends go, "Oh, tell this story."